Hello and welcome. Second Look Sports Show, episode 8. Wow, can't believe we're already here. Exciting stuff coming up. But before we get into anything exciting, I'm Alex Mandarino. We have Justin Arenburg and Brandon Brown here as well. And we're pumped to talk to you about really the week in sports. And normally we're kind of looking for content and we're thinking, what's the best thing to talk about? I mean, this week, it was pretty obvious that there was some storylines that we were not expecting to get into, and we have no choice but to talk about them. I think the best thing to kind of get into is first and foremost, we will be having Sportsnet.ca and Raptors Republic Zulfi Sheikh join us to talk about the NBA trade deadline, which is exciting. But right before the trade deadline, everyone was probably either out or in, maybe watching some TV Saturday night. And a bomb dropped when Luka Doncic was traded from the Dallas Mavericks to the LA Lakers in exchange for Anthony Davis and all the pieces. So before we get into the conversation maybe about him with Zulfi, I'm curious because we asked him this. We didn't really talk about it with ourselves. Where were you guys, and did you see the trade happen live, or were you sleeping? Maybe Brandon, let's go to you first. What were you doing? How did that all shake out for you?
So I was awake. I was still, I was in bed though, but I was awake, and I was actually in Parry Sound, Ontario, staying with my dad and my stepmother, with my brother and some of my family, and we'd watch the Leaf game, hanging out, and then we went to bed. I was still just up on my phone, and this happened, and I was like, "What is happening?" And I was up for another half hour, an hour. I don't even know at this point, but it was awesome. And you don't see breaking news like that anymore where it's completely surprising, but it was entertaining, that's for sure. So yeah, it was great, but I was not, if I had been at home, it would have been different. Get on the desk, pull out the laptop and do that, but I was kind
Yeah.
of restricted to my phone in the situation, and it was cool. It was like I was like part of it. So it was really fun.
That is cool. Justin,
Uh,
I do want to get to you, but I do want to just ask Brandon a
oh
question about his
yeah,
weekend. All right. I
yeah, yeah,
promise we're getting
yeah,
to you.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is
The
you
ODR.
the ODR? How was that? That looked
It,
awesome.
it was awesome. It was on a little lake up in Parry Sound, and where my dad has retired. And so me and my brother, my dad, and our girlfriends are out. They like to, scoot around a little bit. But we were, shooting the puck and going pretty good. It was fun. It was a beautiful day, and you don't get the chance to do that kind of uninterrupted by all these other people when you go out and skate and stuff. So it was great, beautiful scene, and you can't ask for much more. And then, like I said, the Leaf game after that, it was just like a perfect day. So it was great.
Oh yeah,
Good,
that was
good
Wall's big
Canadian
night
day.
too. That was
Yeah, it was
that was
fantastic game
Oh
against
yeah, the
Edmonton. It was
save,
awesome. It was awesome.
yeah. Um, that's
Justin.
the ODR looked beautiful. Just
Yeah,
throwing that out
Yeah,
there.
they did a great
good
job.
day, Justin.
Um, so Saturday night, Royal Rumble happens. I'm watching that.
Yes.
I know you guys talked about it on Second Looks Hockey. I was pretty frustrated with the outcome of that with Jey Uso winning. I understand it. I completely understand it. He's been worked up. Dave had no idea what he was talking about when he was talking about him for like the last 12 months. He has been up and coming superstar. They've tried to get him into singles action a lot more and tried to work his way up. He's a fan favorite, so it makes sense why he. The more I thought about it afterwards, the more uh, it made sense. The only problem was, the more I thought about it, it was like an hour and a half afterwards, and then I'm just like wrestling back and forth in bed because I'm like, how did Jey Uso win over John Cena? And I'm eating some popcorn because, like, I like
Why
popcorn.
not?
Yeah.
I'm with you, man.
Um. Anyway, then I turn my phone off for like, I don't know, 30 seconds, and I always do this. I always leave my ringer on. I don't know why. I'm just paranoid that my alarm's not gonna go off. So I set my alarm, or I set the ringer on, and I get like 30 dings in like less than 30 seconds on, and in like 2 minutes after that. I'm like, what in the world just happened? Anyway, Luka Doncic is an LA Laker, and everyone thinks it's hacked. It was incredible. It was incredible. And then I stayed up for an extra 2 hours to
Yeah.
absolutely just look at Twitter. That was absolutely just like, it was the most brain rotten situation I've ever like done in my life, where I'm just scrolling through Twitter looking at everyone say, "Oh my God!" Like,
It was
Could have just went to sleep.
one of those classic NBA Twitter nights where it was like
Yeah.
everybody
Yes.
was on and everybody was giving their opinions, memeing everything. Like
Oh
it
yeah.
was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was nuts. I was watching Severance, which I don't know if you guys have watched. Good show, just good show. And they're doing it like every Friday. They're not releasing seasons; they're releasing it like one by
Okay.
one. So I was watching the show. You check your phone every once in a while, and so I noticed it on weirdly the Sleeper app, which is where we all did our NFL like
That's weird.
fantasy
Fantasy.
football. So
Yeah.
but they're a big like basketball fantasy and
Yeah,
they
true.
break a lot of things. Like not they as in their analysts, but they have the news broke pretty quickly. So
Yeah.
I see I see the details like Luka Doncic trade. I'm like, this is insane. Like I can't breathe. So I clicked on it. I'm like, all right, I got to go to X, right? As we all did. And it's Shams, obviously. And we're thinking, all right, well, it's midnight. Obviously, like there could be a hack. And then he, like we were saying, clearly it was not. He had to come out and publicly say this is real. And like you guys were saying, I could not sleep. I mean,
Uh,
I was on my phone. We were chatting in our bigger group chat from sports journalism, and like just insanity. Like to
yeah.
this day, it's still something that I can't wrap my head around.
That's probably the biggest sports trade that I can remember. I know
Oh
Gretzky
yeah,
was bigger and was in shock, but this is like the biggest one I've seen.
yeah,
So,
definitely been a
Yeah,
part of.
you don't see many of those where it's like completely surprising. Like I said, it's
hmm.
like you usually have some inkling of somebody wants to go
Yeah.
somebody somewhere or somebody needs to go
Or
because of
trade
money, but
rumors about
exactly.
something.
Just
Like,
was
yeah.
so out of the blue that it was just like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was funny. The only thing that I saw that made me laugh, I can't recall who tweeted this, but someone was basically like, Jimmy Butler, the Heat should just waive him now. Like nobody cares where he goes. You're not the big headline anymore. Just get rid of him. He'll find his way. And then obviously the avalanche of trades that were happening today when we're recording this Thursday, February 6th. Took me a second there. When it's trade deadline. And that's a great segue. I guess we'll get right into the interview with Zulfi Sheikh of Sportsnet.ca. So we're excited to hear from him. He's going to break down some of the NBA trade deadline, Luka, some of the Raptors trades, and we'll get into that in a second here. Okay, pleased to be joined by Sportsnet.ca and Raptors Republic, Zulfi Sheikh. Amazing, obviously, columnist and has great things to say. Probably a crazy couple of days for him. So before we get into anything, Zulfi, first and foremost, thank you for joining us. And before we get into any trades or any NBA trade deadline talk, how have the past couple of days been for you? I'm sure it's just been hectic.
Yeah, it's been interesting because it has been very busy, you're right, but like there was this, I guess, boiling point that we reached that no one expected with the whole Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis thing. That kind of threw everything in a whirlwind. It was funny that for a majority of the lead up, Jimmy Butler was the headline name, and within the span of a couple days, he was like third on the pecking order. So it was interesting to say the least. It got very busy. After the whole Luka Anthony Davis stuff winded down, it was a bit par for the course for the most part, and it made today still a busy day, but not as crazy as it obviously could have been.
Yes, that's good. And we've come to see that over the past couple of years with a lot of sports. Things tend to die down around trade deadline day, but we are eager to obviously touch on the Luka and the Anthony Davis trade. I think the fact that we're in Toronto, we should start local and talk about one of the bigger trades, I guess you could even think about in the league. Obviously, with the Pelicans sending former All Star forward Brandon Ingram to the Raps in exchange for guard Bruce on center Kelly Olynyk and multiple draft picks, including a first and a second. So obviously in sort of a vacuum, Zolfi, it seems like a really great trade and ultimately can be considered one, hopefully down the line. But bringing in Brandon Ingram around this time when a year ago we did hear Masai Ujiri preach patience, right? It sort of changes the direction a little bit. Obviously, the Raptors get better offensively. So just from your perspective, what do you think this trade does for the Raptors rebuild and how does this sort of set the course for the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think it's a valid question. I think coming into the season, especially with how the Raptors came out the gates, at one point they lost 16 of 17 games. It was this idea that the draft lottery is kind of the priority here. Even entering the year, Jakob Poeltl basically said it's development over wins. We know what the priority is. So I understand that this seems like you're kind of accelerating things, but the reality is the timeline for this rebuild probably was never going to be like a Detroit Pistons 4, 5, 6 years. That's not how this team has operated in the past. Frankly, this is the first time they've been in a real kind of like tear it down rebuild. And even then, you had already got Scotty Barnes on his rookie scale max extension. You already have an Emmanuel quickly on his near max deal. RJ Barrett's on a second contract, right? So there was already a ticking clock for these guys. So I think in that sense, they were never really going to do this thing where it was going to be a couple years of being bad. This year, great, do it. I don't think Brandon Ingram necessarily ruins your chances at tanking. But I think the main thing that the organization saw was this is a way to bring talent in the door. I like to refer it as the Raptors tax. This franchise does not get free agents to come here with all the cap space you can build up is great, but if you can't do anything with it, all you're left doing is taking on bad contracts for middling draft picks. And can that kind of strike something? Sure. But without that, the only other way this franchise gets talent in the door is by making swings like this. Is it a risk? Absolutely. Does it kind of seem like it might accelerate the timeline in some people's perspective? Sure. But I think it was Michael Grange who was on the Raptor show today. He put it really well where he said this team's timeline is whenever they get the right players. That's kind of how you have to see it. It's a fluid situation. So when you have the right pieces in the door, that's when things start moving how you want it to. Is kind of the way you should view it, in my opinion.
Yeah, you know what? Raps tax is fair. And ultimately, we've seen this organization take big swings in the past and obviously ultimately paid off, i.e., 2019 and other similar situations. So we've seen this come in and go in different ways. And obviously, we'll just kind of see where it goes in the coming months. And the Raptors not done there, right? We saw a couple of smaller trades today, at least you can put it that way. Sending out Davion Mitchell and bringing in PJ Tucker and cash, and then obviously acquiring center James Wiseman, obviously one of the top picks a couple of years ago. So not as big as Brandon Ingram, but maybe if you could just touch quickly on some of the trades that those Raptors made ahead of the deadline today and what some of those smaller deals might mean for this Toronto team.
Yeah, look, if you were a person who wanted this team to be sellers at this deadline and were caught off guard by the Brandon Ingram trade, there you go. You got a bit of what you wanted.
Yeah.
It is sad to see Davion Mitchell go. He was a very good defensive presence for this team. That entire turnaround they had of late, winning their last, like, what was it, 8 of 11 games or what it was.
Mm-hmm.
He was a big part of that, obviously stepping in for Emmanuel quickly. We know what he offers defensively. But I think at the end of the day, he was upcoming a restricted free agent. I'm not sure what the Raptors' plans were in terms of re-signing him. He's a bit of an older young player. I know he's in his fourth year, but I believe he's on the verge of being 26, 27. And yeah, so were they going to offer, were they going to match an offer sheet if a team came in with a decent deal? Probably not. Their books are already going to be kind of a conundrum with the whole Brandon Ingram situation. So it's one of those things where you recoup some value. Again, you become sellers. You take on PJ Tucker for an extra pick. You're sad to see Davion go. Dude is a basketball junkie. Like I tweeted about it too. This guy is at more G League games in Mississauga than I think anyone I've ever seen. He's probably been to more games than I have at this point,
Wow.
which is saying something. But yeah, good presence, but you recoup the value. And the James Wiseman thing is similar sentiment. You kind of try to super buy low risk opportunity. You get a pick, I think, attached to it as well, if I recall correctly. And you basically give out nothing. The pick that the Raptors are sending back is top 55 protected. So you'd have to be one of the best teams in the league to have a second round pick that late, which is probably not likely. So it's one of those things. There's a club option next year for the Raptors. So they basically get to look at James Wiseman's rehab up close and see if it's something they can work with and bring him back to being an NBA contributor. And he was looking kind of fun near his last couple of games with Detroit before he joined Indiana in the offseason, and then obviously tore his Achilles. So it's one of those, again, buy low opportunities, and that is more of what people wanted to see from the Raptors, those tinkering type moves as sellers, and you got a bit of that. So those were pretty par for the course.
Well, I don't know what people were expecting from the Lakers, though, in terms of, I know people were expecting stuff from the Raptors in terms of selling off players, but from the Lakers side, I don't know if they were expecting to get who they got, and that was Luka Doncic. And to be honest, like, it happened Saturday around midnight, I believe, just after midnight. Shams has to reconfirm that he actually did not get hacked. It was indeed his phone. It was indeed him that tweeted it out. I know you had a crazy reaction. Can you just tell me where you were when the actual trade broke and what you were doing?
I can tell you exactly where I was and exactly what happened. It's not a great story. I was sitting on my couch about 15 feet away from here, and I was watching an Adam Sandler movie on Netflix. If you've seen That's My Boy, it's a really stupid, funny movie. I was in the middle of that. Can't remember what scene it was, to be honest. I think it was just after they had a bachelor party. So that was already craziness going on in there. But I remember looking at my phone and genuinely just jaw to the floor, just gasping I put my I try, I don't want like the comparison because very different circumstances, but I did say that it was very similar to when we got the news of Kobe Bryant and the accident, obviously that him and his daughter were in. But it was similar in the sense where like I'll always remember where I was. I didn't believe it was real at first, and there was just like a whirlwind of emotions going on. It was that dramatic of an instance, and the fact that it was all done so secretively and behind the scenes in this back alley transaction between the two sides, I'm sure we can touch on all that just added to the drama that went into this crazy trade even happening.
Yeah, so like let's dive into it because the Mavs get back Anthony Davis, Christie, and first round pick in 2029. Obviously, I'm not gonna say that it's a terrible, terrible return because Anthony Davis is still one of the best players in the NBA, and we have to realize that. But the fact you're playing or you're trading away a 25-year-old that isn't even really in his prime yet, that is a top three, top five NBA player in the world and can literally carry a team offensively. I know there's problems defensively. What do you think really propelled the Dallas Mavericks to make this move when they did?
I think what really propelled them is they got cheap. They didn't want to invest $350 million of a supermax deal into Luka Doncic. And I think the phrasing that I think puts it really well is they bet against Luka Doncic's body. There's these supposed conditioning concerns that they have, even though this guy has played like pretty much over 60 games every season for his career. He's obviously having injury issues this year, but I think that's more just come up recently. There's been talks that he entered the season in training camp with this calf issue and stuff like that. But again, it's not really anything chronic as far as I'm aware. Like Joel Embiid has had knee issues, for example. But the Dallas Mavericks clearly weren't ready to invest that into Luka Doncic in terms of building a long-term future with him. And I use the word long-term because it's interesting when you hear the GM Nico Harrison talking and they ask him about like, okay, great, you have Anthony Davis. On paper, you could make an argument that this team is better now in the next
Hmm.
2 or 3 years, but what about beyond that? And his initial response is, well, I may not be here in 3 to 4 years. So in my mind, this guy isn't even thinking past that point, which is so it's a very short-sighted idea. There's a debate if you want to have whether that's good or bad, and maybe he's just being realistic about just the lifespan of being a GM in the NBA, sure. But I think the Dallas Mavericks idea was they bet against Luka Doncic. They weren't willing to pay him, and then they ended up netting a top 10 player in the league in Anthony Davis back. And sure, you can make an argument that on paper the Dallas Mavericks have a good chance of being a contender this year, but the counter to that is they were in the finals last year. Like
Hmm.
really, like is anybody picking them to be a favorite to win the title? I don't think so. So at best, you're saying if things break right for them, they'll make a finals, but they had just done it with Luka Doncic, and then we're going this weird circle that I don't think makes any sense.
So the one thing that we can like counteract to that is everyone can remember the Kyrie Irving trade from 2 years ago. And no one thought that that was really going to play out well with Luka and Kyrie. Nico was the only one that really believed in them. And he actually saw a vision with it, and it turned out to be true. So like a little bit give him the benefit of the doubt here. But realistically, you gotta wipe that benefit of the doubt away when you find out that he only offered him to the Lakers in a closed deal. Like, what was your initial
Yeah.
thoughts on that? Like, that's crazy to me.
My initial thoughts, well, is it legal? I I
Like,
guess it
yeah,
is because it happened. But I don't know. It was super interesting. There's so many dynamics at play here with Nico Harrison having been the Nike rep for Anthony Davis. He has a
yeah,
pre-existing relationship with Rob Pelinka dating back to Kobe Bryant. So there's so many like background dynamics. Again, it was really funny when it came out, and then Rob was just like, "Yeah, Nico asked me to be quiet," and like I was gonna like, no, no, duh, you were gonna be quiet. He's offering you Luka
yeah.
Doncic. You're gonna do whatever this guy
Yeah.
says.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it was I I don't even know the word I guess is it's a little grimy in my opinion. That's kind of how I felt as like an outsider just like doing it behind the scenes. I still think if they opened it up to the highest bidder, you could probably have gotten more value in terms of like what kind of return you can net. There is an argument that hey, there would be so much backlash that a deal wouldn't have happened, but my report to that is just like, well, yeah, maybe you shouldn't be doing it if everyone doesn't like the idea. Uh, like maybe you're just a genius and no one believes in you, sure. And I get the point, Justin, about like him believing in Kyrie. He's also the guy that let Jalen Brunson leave the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah,
He's
true.
supposedly also the guy who bungled the presentation with Stephen Curry, and then Nike didn't end up signing Steph. So there's so many things that go behind the scenes that we don't really
Hmm.
know about. But yeah, I don't know. I don't love the idea of picking your trade partner and kind of reverse engineering it almost. I guess if it works out for them in the end, he looks like a genius. But for the most part, if you were gonna kind of completely pivot off Luka here, I think looking for the best return possible would have happened either way. And at the end, if you don't like any of the other offers, you could probably just go to the Lakers and do this anyways.
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Zulfi, and you mentioned guys being able to potentially pick their destinations, and we saw that with Jimmy Butler. Obviously, he wanted it seemed to go to Phoenix and ended up signing the extension, huge extension, $121 million over just 2 years with Golden State. After it was reported that he wouldn't do that, what were your thoughts on that once it all played out, and were you surprised to see that deal eventually come through?
Yeah, it's funny because I think I see this as like a win-win of two parties that seemingly didn't even want to be with each other.
Right.
Like I find that part really interesting. Like you said, Brandon, like Jimmy Butler reportedly was just like reneging all these ideas of even joining the Warriors. Parts of the Warriors being concerned with Jimmy Butler joining that team. Steve Kerr and Stephen Curry apparently had concerns with the fit. Obviously, the idea of Draymond and Jimmy Butler together is incredibly combustible, but it could be very entertaining. I guess we'll find out very shortly. But yeah, but the thing with the Warriors was though, these guys are just so desperate to add somebody to kind of continue Steph's window, and I give them credit for that. They have checked in on just about every single All-Star. If you're an All-Star now or in the past decade, the Warriors have probably called and asked about you at this point. So I give them credit for wanting to extend Steph's window, not waste the rest of his career. So kudos for that. Jimmy Butler, I guess he gets what he wants. It was a bit of tidy business from the Warriors' perspective, in all honesty. Yes, 2 years, 121 millions. In practicality, it's more like a 1 year deal because he already had the player option for next year, anyways, right? So
Fair,
you're
yeah.
really only committing to an extra year than you had to have signed on for if you're the Warriors. So for them, I think it's some good business. Look, Jimmy gets this extension. He gets to join a contending team, and I'm curious to see the fit on court. I think Jimmy is underrated as a ball player. I think he's shown that he can kind of hit some threes from off passes off other players. And frankly, this is probably going to be the most talented group of guys he's been with. Yes, he took two teams to the finals, but I think we gave Jimmy so much credit because those teams were filled with undrafted guys and maybe guys of lesser caliber. So he's never played with a Stephen Curry, especially not at the capability he's at now, especially a guy as smart as Draymond Green being there as well and what he can do as a defender. So I'm very intrigued by the fit. And I find it really interesting that two parties that really didn't initially even want to be together ended up together, and it does still seem like a win-win.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, the fit for sure will be definitely a little bit more entertaining, it seems, than what they might have put together in Phoenix. But with the Suns, Kevin Durant stays there. Where do you see them potentially going in the offseason? Obviously, we'll have to see this, as they're saying, toxic locker room play out, and then kind of will we see these guys go their separate ways, or what do you expect when we get to the summer for Phoenix?
I'm just gonna call Phoenix Suns a bunch of losers. I don't know how else to put it, man. Like one, you gotta lay the bed you make, or whatever the phrase is. Like you took on Bradley Beal, you thought there could be something there. Matt Ishbia, new owner syndrome. He came in. Kudos to want to build a contender, and kudos to this front office for constantly just repeatedly going all in and finding ways to try to go all in. But look, you have to deal with the consequences of that. And now you have a team that's stagnant. You're 25 and 25. I think they're like the 10th seed in the West. I don't really see a path for them going forward. They offloaded Yusuf Nurkic, which hey was decent. You have Nick Richards there now, which is a good center to have instead. But look, I think maybe they can try to say that like, oh, we're kind of past all the drama of the trade deadline now. We know Bradley Beal staying. We can build some continuity. To his credit, before all this stuff happened, Bradley Beal was a lot more engaged defensively. He was turning things around a little bit, so maybe there is some opportunity there. The Suns have had some hot streaks, and they can try to capture that. But there's reporting that Kevin Durant was kind of caught off guard by all these rumors. So how are they going to mend that relationship if it is fractured? What does that mean? He's only inked through I think one more season after this, so like they're gonna have to start figuring that out at some point. So do they just kind of shift this conversation to the summer and try to go through trade packages then? Maybe we're gonna have all these conversations again for the Suns. But if the outcome from this is you didn't even get Jimmy Butler and you pissed off Kevin Durant, I see you as losers. I don't know how else to see them after this.
Hmm. No, that's fair. Do you think when thinking about them, are they the biggest loser from this deadline?
I mean, they have to be up there. I just like making fun of the Chicago Bulls, so I'll mention them too. Like
Yeah, they have 6 point guards still on their roster right now.
yeah, I mean, hey, if you want to actually tank, go ahead, I guess. You can pass the ball a lot and not win many games, but you traded away Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and Alex Caruso, and you didn't get an extra draft pick at all. You basically got back your own draft pick from the Spurs, which I'm almost positive was protected anyways, and given their situation, I think they were going to end up with the pick regardless. Obviously,
Yeah,
lots of odds, and depending on how it falls, there's a chance they can't, but now they can just tank without having to worry about it, but you're probably going to get that pick anyways. And you got that pick in the DeMar DeRozan sign and trade ages ago. DeRozan's not even on your team anymore. It was a lot of just mid from the Bulls, and that's all they've been for the past who knows how long.
yeah. Okay, before we wrap up, obviously busy deadline. So I want to run through names and you just give me a letter grade on what you think or how you think they fit with this team and like the
Okay.
trade that they made. Okay. Wizards, Marcus Smart.
Like C minus, I guess.
C minus.
Yeah.
Bogdanovich to the Clippers.
I'll give it a B.
Deontay Hunter to the Cavs.
Oh, A plus. He's gonna be a good
Yeah,
fit.
I think that's a great
Definitely.
move by the Cavs.
Yeah.
Brandon
Yeah.
Ingram to the Raps.
An optimistic B plus.
Oh, that's
Fair.
interesting. Yusuf Nurkic to the Hornets.
God, if there's worse than an incomplete or like I mean, let's give him a D, sure. There's more on Nurkic than anything.
Okay, this one there we got two players from this trade that I'm going to include in this. Mark Williams going to the Lakers.
I'll give it a B. I'll give it a B. Big haul to give up for Mark Williams. High upside fits Luka, but a lot of risk with his health.
So going back in that return is Dalton Connect. What do you think of that player going to the Hornets?
I mean, I really like it for Hornets to get a young guy to pair there, so I'll give him a B plus. But for Dalton Connect's hopes and dreams, I'll give it a C, like a D. Going to the Hornets, that's just sad.
Yeah, that's true. Warriors and Butler.
B plus.
Okay, Bucks and Kyle Kuzma.
C minus. I'm not a Kyle Kuzma believer currently. Prove me wrong, Kyle. Prove me wrong.
Before this year, he was actually doing great in Washington. So you hope that he was just mailing it in and didn't really care about Washington and hopefully get back to his form in Milwaukee. If not, Milwaukee made a
Yeah.
really
Yeah,
bad
which
decision.
is fair. Like it's like a catch 22 because like he's mailing it in with Washington when he was good in Washington. Hey, you're playing in Washington. You get the ball and get to do everything you want. Like the one time he was a successful role player was on the Lakers ages ago, and he was like a
Oh
third,
yeah,
fourth option. Like I guess he's kind of be gonna be in a similar role here, but can he go back to that after the bad habits he probably picked up in Washington? I guess we'll see.
yeah, that's true. Okay, Martin going to the Mavs. Caleb Martin.
I'll give it a B minus. I think there's some potential there.
AD going to the Mavs.
This is a hard one to grade, given all the context around it. Look, on paper, Kyrie and AD does make a lot of sense, and I think the pieces around them can fit. So, like on paper, I give it an A minus. What they gave up for it, if you account that for it, then it's all the way down to like a D.
Yeah. Spurs and De'Aaron Fox.
I'll give it an A, solid A. There is some questions. Shooting is a concern, but his driving really helps, and if he becomes more of a playmaker, him with Wemby is a scary, scary thought.
I thought you were gonna say A plus for that one just because of that dynamic with Wemby and pairing him
Yeah,
up there. Uh, Kings get back Zach LaVine. Your thoughts on that one?
I mean, they've wanted him for a while. They had an offer sheet for him like way back when I think so.
Yeah.
Vivek Ranadive gets his guy. You're basically building the Bulls in the Western Conference with some, I guess, Lithuanian love.
Yeah.
Uh, I'll give him a B just for vibes, just for the reunion vibes.
Okay, that's fair. Second last one, Lakers and Luka.
That's got to be an A plus. Whatever higher than an
I
A
think
plus,
I
A
think it's
plus,
A
A
Yeah.
plus,
plus, A
whatever.
plus, A
Yeah,
plus, A plus, or
yeah.
A
Like you,
plus plus plus
okay.
plus plus. And
Yeah.
lastly but not least, uh, I'm not. I basically the best way to put this: four trades in one day. Dennis Schroeder ends up on the Pistons. What's your grade there?
Look, I'll give it an A for the fact that Dennis Schroeder, you got swapped from Utah to Detroit. 4 years
Yeah.
ago, if I said that, people would not give a damn because they
Yeah.
both sucked. But at least now the Pistons are decent. They're fighting for imported basketball games, which they haven't done for a while. The Pistons, quite frankly, needed a guard with Jaden Ivey's injury and kind of a secondary ball handler to take some pressure off Cade, who is playing like an all-star. So Dennis Schroeder, you'll get some burn, you'll get some run. I do think it's a bit unfortunate after the comments he made recently about how players are treated a certain way come deadline. That Dennis, that's frankly the reality of what happens when you get paid millions of dollars in this business, unfortunately. But for him to make those comments and then immediately after get traded like twice after he was already dealt to the Warriors, unfortunate timing. But hey, you ended up in a better situation in Detroit, I think. So if he's optimistic about it, I think it's a pretty solid fit.
Yeah, it's five teams in the last 3 months. You go from Brooklyn, Golden State, then you go to Miami, technically for less than like 3 hours or 2 hours, Utah, and then Detroit today. So, I mean, he did do something today that of accomplishment. He did complete the rainbow. So
There we
there
go.
is that.
Nice.
But yeah, Brandon, I'll leave it up to you.
Well,
Or-
actually, I've one just to kind of wrap up, Zolfi. We've taken a lot of your time. Like, I know there's recency bias that probably plays into this, like, considering like obviously Luka AD kind of like shocking the world on a Saturday night of all nights. But do you consider the NBA trade deadline to be the best trade deadline of the four major sports in a vacuum, or like would you say it like fits somewhere in the middle? What's your thoughts on that?
I may sound biased, and this is also coming from someone who's not like diehard locked into hockey and baseball trade
Sure.
deadlines. Obviously, do take part in those somewhat, but I will say yes in the sense that I think the transactional nature of the NBA is, I guess, appreciated or enjoyed to a degree far greater, in my opinion, than some of the other
Mm,
sports. Like, yes, obviously every sport transactions are super important, but it's almost like a 50-50 in the NBA. It feels like as part of the product. Obviously, the influence that a guy like Shams have, there's people like that in other sports, I understand, but like there's a cultural aspect, and I think you saw it with example of that mega blockbuster with Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis. Like you had outlets from different countries talking about it. Like I saw a
right.
European soccer game and the post game interview, they're asking these guys like, "What did you think about the Luka Doncic Anthony Davis trade?"
Yeah.
Like it is just it caught everybody off guard. It
Oh
is
yeah.
wild to a different level. It was a cultural impact almost, I think, when that happened, and it just speaks to just how much people get sucked in by transactions when it comes to the NBA, and I think that just adds to so much of like this hype machine that exists.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think it's fair. And ultimately the winner and losers, we've talked about him all night, is probably Woj, right? Like he's the winner in all this. I got
He
to
gets some
sleep
sleep, yeah.
peacefully.
Yeah,
Yeah, I got
yeah.
to relax. You don't have to put me on ESPN, what, at 3 in the morning. Awesome. Zolfi, we've taken up enough of your time. Thank you so much for joining us, giving some insight in the trade deadline. And obviously we hope to hear from you soon.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. A lot of fun.
Welcome back. Thank you for taking the time to listen to that interview. Second guest on Second Look Sports, Zulfi Sheikh.
Second
Exciting
basketball
stuff.
guess.
Second basketball guest.
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
rightfully so. It's been a crazy couple of days in the NBA. And it's funny that we had Ian on last time and it was like right before the trade, like days before. Like imagine
Yeah.
getting him on, a day or two later. But whatever, that's fine. We'll have him back later. So before we get to the big Sunday game, obviously in the NFL, like it's funny that the NBA trade deadline sort of taken over for a couple of days right
Yeah.
before the Super Bowl. Zulfi, we asked him and he had his thoughts on this, and we kind of talked about it before we jumped on the recording. What do you guys think in terms of the big four sports trade deadlines is the biggest? Like, is the NBA the biggest trade deadline? Justin, I know you are sort of advocating for maybe no, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And then Brandon, we'll see what your thoughts are as well.
So I know I'm already on a I guess a lone pole here, or a lone flag
Lone
pole,
pole.
lone
Okay,
flag pole.
that's fair.
I'm waving the flag, uh, or I'm holding the flag. I'm not waving the flag, not waving the white flag.
Fair.
Basically, the NHL I think has the biggest trade deadline. A lot of pieces move that day. It's a lot of madness. It's a lot of surprises. It might not be the magnitude of um, an NBA deal such as Luka, but we did get Miko. I know that Brandon says it doesn't count, that Miko Rantan's not a deadline deal. But guess what? Guess what? Everything that counts after the trade freeze, between the trade freeze and the trade deadline, that is a deadline deal. Because they would have done this at the deadline anyway, for in terms of Rantan, if you
Well,
know.
yeah, I'll
Yeah.
give you that. I'll
So
give you the timing that the trade freeze that does in some way kind of coordinate with the deadline. So fair. That's fair.
Mhm.
yeah. So let's just put that there. The NHL, in my opinion, with how many players move, I think it makes it for a better deadline day. Like in the NBA, yeah, you get some bigger trades, I would say, but it's really just like a lack of trades. Like it's unless it's like the last 30 minutes, like you only get like three or four trades. While in the NHL, you could have 30 on deadline day. That is insane to me. And that's my argument for why it's the best one in the league, or out of all four leagues.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with the premise that in the NHL you see a little bit more activity for sure, but I think at least in the last handful of years, there's always I'd say a bigger kind of hubbub about the NBA, and when you're seeing huge stars, particularly some of the biggest earners in the league moving, there were threats of other big stars, Kevin Durant. You never know what's going to happen with LeBron James. Just a few guys that didn't get moved. You never know, who's available. I feel like in the NHL, you kind of have a much clearer view of who's available, which makes it not as surprising when these some of these players, Rantanen aside, that was a very surprising move. I think that made sense after you look at it, but nobody really knew was happening. But most of the deadline deals are, like you said, are smaller, not insignificant because a lot of those moves are significant to their teams, but it's just not in terms of entertainment and um,
Mhm.
at least activity on social media. The NHL would love to have the biggest trade deadline. I think there have been years where they do dominate some of the coverage, but I think in general, what we've seen recently leans to the NBA.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys are both kind of approaching it from different perspectives. So I can give you
I think
both
so too, yeah.
the credit. Yeah. Like I look at it more, I guess, on Brandon's side for the entertainment aspect. Like, I think when you look at the NHL, there's such hype. And like we look at it through rose colored glasses. We're like, this is going to be sick. Like, objectively, there's so many names on the trade board. And then some of those guys don't go. And I know it's the same in the NBA, but like sometimes you don't have any idea what's going to happen. And this year clearly proved it. Again, this is all recency bias, like Luka and obviously like Jimmy, you kind of knew, De'Aaron Fox, who was rumblings, Brandon Ingram. But it didn't feel like all of this was going to happen within a span of like 24 hours outside of Luka. That's clearly what, 72 hours, something like that. But
Yeah.
it just felt like this year was something you didn't really expect it to be, like a crazy deadline. And once that first domino fell, this whole past couple of days I had trouble keeping up. And the Raptors were involved. So I think that helps my brain being like, oh, the Raptors are players. So I don't know.
Yeah, but you gotta think like we're not even at the deadline yet, and you got star players like Granlund, uh, Marcus Patterson. I'm not saying Marcus Patterson's like a superstar,
Yeah.
obviously, but he's a top four
But
defenseman and
big
he's really
player,
good.
big name player. Yeah.
JT Miller and Miko Rantanen already dealt. And who knows, Miko Rantanen could be dealt again before the trade deadline because
That'd be
of that
nuts.
situation in Carolina, if they can't re-sign him. And if they don't think they can get re-sign him, very viable to probably trade him. Um, so what I also like look at is like there like we're talking about shock. Like there is some like I can understand like the NHL. The only thing I can say like is like for the NHL, it's more so predictable who's gonna get traded. I would say because you
Mm,
kind of have a bigger board about that. De'Aaron Fox, like yeah, there was a little bit of rumblings, but you still didn't think like he was actually gonna get traded from Sacramento, in my opinion. Um, but like every single year, like the guys in the NHL are gonna get traded. It's just some of those years there are big names that are going to get traded, but you already know, so it's less of a shock value. So like it doesn't have the same element as probably something like a Luka Doncic trade that would
yeah.
happen. Like the big one last year for the NHL was Thomas Hurdle,
Yeah.
going from San Jose
Yeah.
to Vegas at
Vegas.
the last
Vegas.
minute by so yeah, like it's just it's a lot more predictable in my opinion. So that's the difference.
I mean,
Yeah.
with the salary cap rising, apparently the NHL could see more activity because more money, brings more potential for movement because there's more stakes when there's more money involved, and teams will look to move off players faster. And we've already seen some of that in certain cases. So, and teams aren't going to take risks in terms of letting players get to free agency, and because we've seen teams in the past risk it, and it's kind of bit them in the end, but. We'll have to see. I guess it would be great if it trended upwards for the NHL. We'll see what this
Yeah.
what the actual deadline looks like um this season, and yeah, hope for the
Yeah,
best.
I
the
hope
best way I
so.
can put it is the NBA from the top five or maybe even the top three players onward are available for trade almost, it feels like. And the NHL, except for Rantanen, is most likely the top 20 and down. Like after 20, after number 20 in the league, then they probably become more available.
Yeah.
It's just more unlikely that you're going to get a top 20 player outside of Mikko Rantanen in a mid-season NHL deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope Brandon, like at that point too, like that we see those moves more at the deadline. Because on the flip side, when you get teams at the bottom of the league that won't have the opportunity to spend, they'll have to hit the cap at some point, like the floor. They'll be just taking on extra deals. We might just see more like third party trades that just might get involved with teams being like, yeah, I'll take on half the salary. And so we'll see those moves being facilitated probably more. But this will be the first deadline that we kind of see. Maybe this thing start, and then next year when we see like a 7.5% increase, might be even more trending more in the right direction. But we'll see. Trade deadlines are exciting nonetheless. So before we get into the Super Bowl, second looks, what do we have to take a second look at this week? Brandon, let's shoot it over to you. And who are we looking at this week?
Yeah, I'm actually going to take a second look. It's kind of a different tone than what we usually do, but I'm taking a second look at Rory McIlroy and his comments. I think it was
Oh,
yesterday or the other day, or 2 days ago, I believe it might have been on Wednesday, or sorry, Tuesday. Um, Regarding there was a letter put out by a fellow golfer in the PGA, Charlie Hoffman, kind of taking some shots at some of these guys for kind of their style of play and taking time to play in some of these TGL matches and some of these other tournaments. So he responded and was kind of fired up about it. I'm excited to kind of see what happens going forward on the tour and in the TGL. We're seeing more and more players move over to that league, and it's been kind of fun. There have been a lot of blowouts, so it's not been the best entertainment, but from what I've seen, ESPN's got some great viewership numbers, and so I think if the players are enjoying it, and maybe there's going to be a little bit more internal competition, that's only going to make better for the PGA. So that was
I
something
think
that
it's
caught my
great.
eye this week and wanted to take a look. If you have a chance, go
yeah.
check out those comments because it was quite the interesting few moments there from McElroy.
Okay. I like it. I
Yeah.
like it. Damn.
Um, okay, my taking a second look is gonna be number 98 of the Chicago Blackhawks, Connor Bedard. Paul Bissonnette last night on the TNT broadcast kind of went at him pretty hard, said that he wasn't, or sorry, that if he's gonna play the way that he is right now, they're probably not gonna win Stanley Cups. They're probably gonna be a bottom feeder in the NHL for a very long time. Um, it's just like a lack of like coming back on like the back check or forecheck or sorry, lack of back checking is what he was complaining about when he turns the puck over. Like he's like you don't see McDavid don't or you don't see McDavid not attempt to skate back and try to get back in the play. Bedard was kind of just, I guess, lazy, I would say, in terms of getting back into the defensive zone last night. um yeah, Bissonnette is right. Or there are some bad habits that could be developing. Um, Now, Connor Bedard also had comments today on that and said, you know what, it's the media's job to call out and talk about this. He doesn't have any comments on it. He knows that he's not played well this year. He knows that he has had mistakes and he holds that on himself. And he said, I don't need a TNT broadcast to tell me that I'm playing bad. Like I already know the mistakes that I'm making. So like he said he's not paying any attention to it. So
Clearly
the
paying
reason I'm
attention.
taking a second look is I kind of want to see what his like out or his like next like two games before the
Yeah.
break kind of look like. Just to see if he's a little bit harder in the defensive zone, if he's back checking a little bit more, if he's probably staying back a little bit more and not going more offensively, trying to be a little bit more detailed in his own zone. Um, Obviously, special talent. I think he's the best under 23 talent there is in the NHL, but there are some habits that are starting to develop that you cannot have for a number one center or franchise center in the NHL.
I'm worried more. He looks so defeated in those in that
Yeah,
image.
Yeah.
Like he
yeah,
just and there's been other instances too where it's not going well for him there, and it's tough to see. And you're right to the point there will be more eyes on him, I think, after this kind of back and forth with Biz. So we'll have to see, yeah, if he'll respond. I have a feeling the kid will, but it's tough
yeah.
when
They need
he doesn't have a lot with him, right? Who's
They don't
riding
have
No.
anyone.
shotgun?
Like
Yeah.
everyone keeps on comparing him to Celebrini, and like Celebrini's so much better. No, you know who's actually better? Mike Greer. Mike Greer is better than Kyle Davidson because he actually set up a
Yeah.
team to come around him, and he brought in actually vets that actually fit the positions, like a Tyler Toffoli, instead of Teo
Yeah.
Teravainen to set up a reunion tour with Chicago. I'm like very fired up about that topic because that is absolute bullshit in my opinion. That they even compare the two because Bedard, every single scout would have told you that Bedard is another level ahead of Celebrini. It's not because Celebrini's bad. It's just the way that the teams were set up coming into their draft year and what they've been able to do since then. I give Mike Greer a lot of credit. That's where I'm going to leave this
Yeah.
because there is like Kyle Davidson, his job should be on the line in my opinion.
Yeah, I look at it too, and I just think like Bedard is always he's young. I don't know always. I can't comment on his like the head on his shoulders, but from what you read and from what you hear, because he's been on the spotlight for a while, his family life has really, and he's always been focused on hockey. It really seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders. Speaking of that, like Celebrini probably is like a 35-year-old man trapped in what an 18-year-old's body. That guy is very smart and very dialed. But speaking about Bedard, he's always been very hockey focused. I think his cleanliness and his like in terms of his regiment and his health cleanliness, in terms of like eating clean, right? Like he's someone who focuses on
Oh
his health. He
yeah.
focuses on getting better. No McDonald's or something, right? From like when he was
Oh yeah.
born, like something like that.
He's
But
like McDavid and Sid.
which is good. You
Yeah.
got to be. But I don't know if he's just taking so much heat. Dude, it's been a year and a half. Like you knew you were going to be on a bad team. And if you're going to get all of this stuff stuck in your head after a year and a half, like then maybe this isn't cut out for you right now. Like I'm not saying put him in the AHL. Like that's the stupidest thing that you could say. Like you have to surround him with good players and maybe it's poor asset management. But I think at the end of the day, you're a franchise player. You just got drafted and you knew you're going to play for a bad team. It's going to weigh on you. The sophomore slump that some might be able to call it might be hitting. And that's understandable. But man, like you're going to deal with this regardless of what franchise you are. If you're drafted first overall, you're likely on a bottom feeder team. So at the end of the day, you have to push out all of that noise and at least do your best to build your own stock and you'll get help. And if after next year, then we hear the same things, then maybe I'm more on Bedard's side. I think you got to just roll with the punches and roll with the hand that you're dealt. Otherwise, what are you going to do after a year of this happening again? Like, it's a bad look. I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah. Well, instead of giving me your thoughts, give me your second thought.
I'll get my second look. Anthony Stolarz. Anthony
Oh yeah,
Stolarz is
Ooh, love it,
you.
love it.
back.
Uh,
This just broke a couple hours ago. But Anthony Stolarz, 31-year-old goalie for the Toronto Maple Leafs, is back. He's playing against Seattle tonight. Again, you're hearing this on Friday, so we'll see how his performance was. He could let in 5, and
he
maybe
could
we
be
don't want to
injured
take
again.
any more looks or that. So he's missed 24 games. He was injured, I think, December 12th, obviously removing like a little pebble piece from his knee. It's just exciting to see. I think he's just going to end up being like a jolt for the team. Wall has performed very admirably in his absence. Some of the other goalies like Matt Murray filled in. Hildeby was a little bit of an experiment that didn't work out for this year. I think he still needs more development, but it's going to be great to have more of a stabilizing presence and have your 1A, 1B guy be available, hopefully, at least before the break. Surprised they didn't just wait till the Four
Yeah,
Nations break, but
this is why I'm like,
yeah, a little
why not just
strange.
like give it till after the break because then you get a 2 week break. But
I don't know.
also at the same time, you give him another 3 weeks, that probably, unless he's
Yeah,
practicing every day, his body's probably not going to be up to speed for
yeah.
coming
Get a
back from
couple
Well,
injury.
games in.
the standings too, like they were at a time first in the division. Now that's
True.
not the case anymore. They're still
Yeah,
in the fight,
they're
but
still they're
Yeah,
still
yeah,
yeah.
everyone's still in the
they're
fight,
gonna
man.
be.
Like,
But it looked a lot different when he was coming back. When it looked like he was coming back, they might have given him the time just based on how things have gone. But you gotta get him going. You gotta hope every minute
the
helps get him going.
The
Yes,
East, the
that's
East
fair.
is tight though. Like it's
Yeah.
it's gonna be tight all the way down. Like if Toronto finishes first or second or third, like it's not a big deal in my opinion. It
Yeah.
just comes down to playoffs. Like it really does.
Who would you guys say would be the starting goalie today, game one of the playoffs?
Stolars,
Today.
Stolars.
Today.
Give
Say it
it to
was today.
Stolars,
Oh,
Stolars, the
See,
Stolars.
I'm just gonna go Wall just
wow.
because of recency bias and you've seen him
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
play and
yeah.
you know what you're
That's
getting. Stolars might have a higher ceiling. We don't know. But I
Give
like
me
that thought
Stolars
right
Um,
game
now.
one.
I think Wall game one. I don't think you can go wrong either way. I think
Exactly.
that's safe to say. But just because the fact that Wall's played a pretty consistent amount of games, played like 18 of the past 24 or something. I think he's rolling, and Stolarz just might not be in
Yeah,
game
you know
action.
what?
I don't know.
That's fair. But you know what is also fair? The fact that even if Wall or Stolar screws up game one, you have game two to
Yeah,
decide in a playoff series.
it's
Guess who
true.
doesn't have that? Guess who doesn't have that?
Doesn't have that.
Jalen Hurts and Patrick
Oh,
Mahomes this
you
Sunday.
got one game. You got one game. Yeah, I guess there's a big game on Sunday that has just not taken the headlines. Have you guys watched any of the media tour at all? Like anything that comes out of that you guys have excitement for, or what's been the big headlines there?
I mean, for me, it's been how much they've actually talked about the refs and the
I
Chiefs
know.
and what's been going on in that narrative. Like they've been like the media, give the media credit. They asked Goodell, they've been asking Mahomes and Kelsey and all these
Oh
guys,
yeah,
like
they're
putting them on the
feeding into
spot
it.
and being not that it's like something they would seriously have to hide or anything, because we've seen a bunch of refs and people come out about it not being, it can't be true. Like there's no way. So it's just that to me was like, what is happening? How are we in this universe? But
Yeah, it's been very, very interesting this week. Even Travis Kelsey kind of like was asked like, "Do you have a question for the media?" And he's like, "Why are you guys feeding into this?"
Yeah.
Like I understand. He's like, "I understand fans feeding into it, the whole narrative, but why are you guys feeding into it?" Like that's what really is making me upset right now. Um, but the bigger news, I guess, that I've seen come out of this so far this week is Jalen Carter of the Philadelphia Eagles. I, so he's sick, like he's sick,
Hmm.
sick, and apparently he's spreading it around the locker room throughout the practices. Because obviously they're trying to get him ready to go. They're trying to get him going. They want him to play on Sunday. They obviously need him to play on Sunday. The guy's a game changer.
Yeah.
Um, do you think a little flu bug is gonna hurt Philadelphia though? Like it might like it
it's
that
possible
like
if the right guys
the
get it and
natural
it.
element,
Well,
man, like just of being sick, like that
Yeah.
sucks.
my
We've
instinct though
seen it
is
with.
that. Sorry,
Go
Alex,
ahead,
go ahead.
Brandon.
Oh,
I was just gonna say we've seen it with like this is a bad example. It's a different sport. Michael Jordan flu game. Like you got one
Yeah.
game, you can't use that as an excuse. It's a very like, oh, this would be brutal, and Philly fans would use it to the detriment if they lose. But I think, listen, shoot them up with something. Unfortunately, you probably have some type of antibiotic that you have on the sidelines that's legal that you can give these guys, and they can battle for what 60 minutes or so.
yeah, my thought would be that they would be able to somehow, like, if he was getting having symptoms and he didn't let anybody know or whatever, and was certain, that's one thing. But hopefully, they would be able to sequester him kind of on his own. And if it's only Thursday, technically when we're filming today, so
Yeah.
he's got a good chance to play, I think. And it's just hopefully
I'm
nobody
nervous.
else
I'm
gets it
nervous.
now. Because if
I'm
you get it now,
nervous. Yeah, you're
it's
you're screwed. You're like you got 48 hours till game time. You gotta like calling the best doctors in the world to get me ready for this game on Sunday. I don't know. I'm nervous. I'm nervous, guys. I'm nervous that flu is not going to be on. It's going to be a reason. And the only good thing is, like you mentioned, like Philadelphia can say like, if we lose, like we are all sick. We can also say three-peat doesn't count. Philadelphia was all sick, so
Yeah.
three-peat just doesn't count. Um, Yeah, I'm really nervous. I'm so nervous.
Are I've asked a bunch of people this. I don't know if I've asked this on this pod. Like, are the Chiefs in a vacuum? I think Brandon, you and I had this conversation on a different like in a different video. Are they a likable team? Like
No,
objectively, can we like the Chiefs?
no. Nah,
No.
they're not. They're not. And it's the same as the Patriots. The Patriots weren't a likable team. Any team
Hmm.
that wins is not a likable team. You think Golden State was a likable team? No.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Golden State is the
No.
most likable team
After they got Kevin
of this
Durant, they weren't.
dynasty.
They
Yeah,
were not. They were
I
hated
don't
once they got
know.
Kevin
I
Durant.
I
don't
like
know.
that. I like that because the Chiefs, I feel like in, 2019 when they won their first Super Bowl, they were very much like endeared. Like people
Oh yeah,
loved them.
they
Patrick
loved them.
Mahomes was the next guy. And I think
Yeah.
with the Warriors and Steph Curry, we saw that too, where when they were winning and they won the 73 games, I think, even though they lost that year, I think to the Cavs, like Steph and those guys they were like the next group of team, like the team to, whether it was the Spurs or the Pistons before then, whatever, like that kind of dynasty. And but then once Kevin Durant came, everyone started to hate them. I don't think that
Yeah.
Yeah.
anything specific has happened in terms of like a player has come or gone. If anything, they got
I
more
mean
likable
Tyreek
when Tyreek
Hill.
Hill left. They probably got a little bit more likable, but maybe
No,
not as
well,
entertaining.
I don't know because
so
then you added Taylor Swift and
that
everyone
That's
that's
hates.
what it is
that's
now
that's
people
it.
hate them
That's the
because of her,
addition,
right? I think
which is
that's
so
So
silly. But you know what? I will say too. I obviously the circumstances make me not favor the Chiefs because you don't want to. You just want to see a new team, and it's the same narrative. Referees aside, that's a completely different conversation. And clearly, if you're thinking straight, that doesn't play into this series. But Mahomes is likable, and the team itself, Chris Jones, Travis Kelsey is starting to get into the territory, in my opinion, of like you're starting to become a little unlikable. Like all of this, what was he like getting the crowd going at the end of the AFC championships? Like, dude, you had 2 catches for 17 yards. Like, you got to read the room. He's still a likable person, but I feel like it ventures into people just start taking what they can and going, nah, I don't like this team because of this. And I'm trying not to buy into it because I do think they're likable. I still don't want to see them win, and I don't know why.
yeah, well, the simple answer is you don't want to like when a team's on a dynasty, you don't want to see that team win again.
It's
That's
just,
just
yeah.
that's just a simple answer. Like the
Yeah.
Patriots, everyone hated the Patriots. Everyone used to rip on me for the Patriots. Like the sad thing is, like people joke about the Patriots right now, but like your team still hasn't won a championship. Like
Yeah.
other than the Chiefs,
Yeah.
like
I know.
the Patriots literally have won 6 championships in the last 20 years. You can just go back to winning. Like it doesn't matter. Like haters are gonna hate dynasties. It's just a thing. It's just a
Yeah.
fact
That's
of life.
sports.
Yeah, it's just sports.
It's sports.
And so
We don't have
yeah, I, I'm
no.
I'm totally going against the Chiefs. And if we're doing score predictions right now,
I think
um,
we do score. I think we do so score obviously the winner, score, and I think MVP.
all right. So I'm gonna say 31 to 24. 31 to 24. That will be for the Philadelphia Eagles. They're gonna win 34 or 31 to 24, and then the MVP is going to be Saquon Barkley. He's gonna rush for 225 yards, 2 tutties, 225, 2 tutties. That's what I got.
Okay. Nice. Nah, I like it, Brandon.
Justin's not gonna like this.
Oh no.
I'm gonna take
Chiefs 41-14.
no. Oh, bro, no, no, no. Please, I'm going to take I think the Chiefs. Whether or not I'm kind of indifferent. I don't really have a preferred option in this game,
Right.
but I think the Chiefs in the end will somehow end up winning. I'm gonna say it's gonna be 30 to 27 for Kansas City. They probably win on a field goal. I wouldn't be surprised if Philadelphia won, but I think the Chiefs. There's something about them where they just find a way, and I don't know. It's just interesting. It's going to be a great game. I'm excited to watch, but my MVP is probably going to be Patrick Mahomes because that's what
Yeah.
he does. He goes and he wins games and he does it in a way that makes him look like he's the best player. Even if he's not, he just has, there's something about him. It's similar to Tom Brady. Like he has something that just makes it it'll all come together, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, if I were a betting man, I'm taking 34-28 for the Chiefs. And I don't want that to happen. I can't believe that the Chiefs forced me to cheer for a Philadelphia-based team, but here we are. I think MVP, it's gonna be like I can never remember years, but the Rams, the Patriots over the Rams, where Julian Edelman took home the MVP. I think Hollywood Brown is going to make a
Bro,
random,
what?
unbelievable performance.
It's insane.
Look, if it's not the Chiefs, the reason the
Uh,
Chiefs will lose would be Saquon Barkley,
uh,
and he would get MVP if the Eagles win.
I
I
don't
am on
hate
that
I don't
train,
hate
no
I
question.
think the Chiefs is a smart pick. I don't know about I wouldn't put much money on the
Hey,
Hollywood Brown one,
hey,
but
it's
I
totally
can't disagree
fair.
with you.
Obviously, Mahomes is big money,
take
but I
DeAndre
just
Hopkins. You
with
might
a
as well
shot.
sprinkle money on
No,
DeAndre
Hollywood
Hopkins.
Brown, I think, has better slot opportunities, but that's just your boy. I don't know. Either way, it will be fun. So exciting stuff. We got a lot covered today, guys. I think this is a great show. Thank you to Zulfi for joining us. Hopefully have more stuff down the pipeline to talk about. Otherwise, we'll talk about the Super Bowl. Drop your Super Bowl predictions when you can in the comments. Like, subscribe, and leave 5 stars. Other than that, enjoy your Sunday, and we'll talk later.
Enjoy the big game.